I've always been a strong believer of like, hey, if you don't know what you're doing, go first.
The platforms develop these massive trust and safety teams, and they develop this sort of set of almost laws. We as users, we don't know what those are.
And then you'll get into a situation where you're disputing, and then the disputes are kind of automatic too. So a lot of the times creators are, to Rabble's point, are at the mercy of these platforms.
This week on revolution.social, we have the pleasure of listening to a conversation that Rabble recorded with Taylor Lorenz, the well-known journalist, and Reggie COUZ, who was an original Vine creator and continues to create and make music today. One of the things that I thought was so interesting about this conversation, and I hope you enjoy it too, is that one conversation really centers around, can we make social media good again? And Reggie is one of those creators who has spent quite a bit of time trying to understand like the infrastructure, the underpinning, the industry plays that happen around social media. And when I first met with him, he had already kind of done some digging around decentralized ownership of tech. And so we thought it would make for a very interesting conversation to bring him together with Taylor and Rabble to chat about what the future holds for social media. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Take a listen.
So to start off, I want to give people some background in terms of kind of what decentralization means and how you guys got into it. So maybe I'll start with you, Rabble, since you've been in the game for a long time. Like, what is sort of this idea of this decentralized type of platform, and how did you get into, into sort of this version of the internet?
Sure. I mean, so first of all, it's important to remember that like decentralization doesn't mean cryptocurrency necessarily. That cryptocurrency is one kind of decentralization, but decentralization just says that the technology is set to run across many different servers or many different applications instead of being controlled in a central place. And the internet itself was designed to be decentralized. You know, when they say, it was designed to withstand a nuclear war, it was the idea that there's no central point of control. And that has huge impacts in how you use the technology and how it works. And, when we created podcasting, Odeo was the first podcasting company that was funded. We were really trying to say, how do we decentralize radio and how do we make it work? And that effort worked. Now you can choose whatever podcast app you want. You choose what hoster you want, what advertising provider you want. And so podcasters have a lot of power in this situation. And then when we saw other social media apps start showing up, we noticed what happened if we didn't have that structural sort of decentralization in it.
Yeah, I like that you said the web originally was decentralized, because I think actually it's kind of hard to remember, but it's like no one owns all the web services. You know what I mean? Even now you can go on the internet and it is still decentralized. Podcasting is a great example. You got into the internet through Vine.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about sort of your career and how did you get into this idea of decentralization?
Sure. So like you said, I started on Vine. I was at the very early stages where short content was kind of like niche. And at the same time as me being a creative, I just wanted to find different ways to express myself and my ideas, because I knew like I'm talented, and but what are ways that I could showcase that without doing it the traditional way. And as I kept making videos and making new pages for YouTube and Facebook and all the other platforms out there, I ran across a situation where one of my videos got flagged, but they wouldn't give me exactly a reasoning. So I was kind of like, I don't want to say a red flag, but that was something to be like, I got to be cautious about it. And then 2020 happened, and everybody was like, oh, the world is on fire. And, the whole, the virus came out, and I was basically in my room looking at Twitter, and a bunch of people were like, oh, the stock market is going down, and that's why I'm putting my money in the Bitcoin. And I'm like, okay, I've heard Bitcoin for about 5 years now. I need to understand like what it is. And the root of it all, it was less about the price. It was more about the decentralization of distribution on a blockchain. So I was just really fascinated with the idea of like what exactly is decentralization, and from that day forward, I was like, I need to really understand exactly what this is. So
Yeah, I feel like crypto in a lot of ways, it's so, as Rabble said before, decentralization is not synonymous with the
right,
cryptocurrency world. But I think the word decentralization and this idea of a different kind of structure for our technology did really become pervasive, as you mentioned, with the rise
right.
of crypto. So, Rabble, can you talk a little bit about kind of, I guess, building technology products and this idea of decentralization? Can you first describe kind of how the web 1.0 works and like why weren't those products decentralized? Like why do we have this internet that we have now?
Yeah, so Web 1.0 had this idea that you would go and you would pay for a server and you would put up HTML and images and you'd put up the website, and only the webmaster could update it. And Web 2.0 said, well, we should invert that and let the users create stuff and the users build stuff. And when we first did that, there was first blogging, which is how you got started, Taylor, which is just like, oh, I can just post an article easily, and it's my own blog, and the software handles it. And then when we created Twitter, there was this idea of, well, let's just make it over the phone. Let's just make you send the text messages over the phone. And the original hope was that there wouldn't be trust and safety problems. There wouldn't be like everybody's just going to be nice to each other because people like you should trust who you're talking to. And so initially Twitter didn't have a trust and safety team. It was just like, well, let's just all be about free speech, and if we just don't take anything down, it'll be okay. And you know, it's very telling that there was only one woman on the team at the time, and her job was to deal with the problems and all of the reports. But the reality was, once you had a single server, once you had a company behind it that was responsible, then the users lost the power to regulate and set up these things. And then you became dependent on the platforms. And the platforms developed these massive trust and safety teams, and they developed this sort of set of almost laws around it. But the users, we as users, we don't know what those are. Like, so we're operating in this system where we don't know what the rules are, and you can get your accounts taken away. And I know both of you have had issues with your accounts suspended or taken away, and you don't even know why.
Yeah, and I want to ask you about this, Reggie, because you're a creator and you mentioned that you had this video flagged.
Yes.
First of all, let's just establish this video was not anything too crazy, was it? I mean, you weren't doing
No,
some
not
gore.
real. No, 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 no.
So it was a pretty normal video, it sounds like, or at
Mhm.
least in line with your previous content. Can you describe that process of a creator and just the loss of control and kind of like, do you think this is a common experience? Because I think it would probably resonate with a lot of people today, even who aren't creators, who have had something that they've posted be flagged as spam or,
Yeah, yeah. Some of it. So I do a lot of music-based content. Sometimes I'll do covers of songs. Sometimes I'll have something that maybe is a snippet from a movie or anything of that sort. And a person that might have a ownership in something along that video, they can flag it. And then when the video goes down, that's considered a strike. And sometimes like you'll have like creators getting back-to-back strikes, and then they'll flag your page altogether. And then now you're suspended and you can't post at all. And then you'll get into a situation where you're disputing, and then the disputes are kind of automatic too. So you're like, well, can I speak to a representative?
Yeah.
But it's never been too easy to get hands on somebody that could actually help with your situation. So a lot of the times creators are, to Rabble's point, are at the mercy of these platforms, and we don't have clear rules, or if we do look at the terms and conditions, which are probably like 150 pages long.
And you don't have any say either. It's like
Right.
you either accept
Right.
whatever the terms and conditions are and use the platform,
Basically.
or you walk away. You have no agency.
Right. And when you have your supporters that are, very comfortable with whatever platform you're posting your content on, it's difficult to explain to them. They're like, hey, I want to, go to this platform over here that could get, be better for all of us. But, that's one of the things that, to do here is explain why that's important.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned it sounds like a copyright issue, which
Yes.
is very frustrating. There's also just this whole range of issues, as you mentioned, Rabble, earlier, that's fall under sort of trust and safety. Um, can you talk about how you evolve, like your view on trust and safety evolved? And there are people that'll say, well, the decentralized internet will never work, or these decentralized platforms will never work because there isn't this central control of somebody doing a ban hammer, and it's just going to be overrun with spam and scammers and bad actors because
Yeah.
it's too open.
I mean, so there are ways in which you can design systems that are too open and don't have systems of control. But if you look at like the studies of the commons, there are examples of a commons where the common forestry or the fields or whatever or waterways are well managed, and there are examples of it not being well managed. And so, Eleanor Ostrom, the first woman to win the Nobel Prize in economics, she studied this stuff, and she studied real world commons, but we can apply it to digital things and say, okay, you can make systems that aren't owned and controlled in a single place by a single person, and have systems of accountability, but you do need ways in which people can have control. And we see that with some of the things. We see that with the way the web works, with the way email works, with the way podcasting works, the way web forum work, where or even subreddits, where the central platform isn't making all those decisions, and you know who to appeal to and who to account for. And then, one of the things that happened to Reggie was the whole platform got pulled.
Yeah.
Like Twitter owned Vine,
Yes.
and then Twitter's just like, we don't want to run it anymore. You can't post here anymore, and we're going to take your content away. We're going to take your livelihood away. We're going to take your communities away. And the Viners had no say.
No.
Well, I think creators don't have a say at all, right, in terms of how their content is distributed, the environment in which people consume it. I mean, even when you consider the change from Musical.ly to TikTok, there was this whole generation of musers that kind of lost their ability to connect with their audience because the platform had so radically changed.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about Divine, which is, you mentioned sort of like we're bringing back Vine. If you guys, I don't know if you're familiar, but maybe do you want to talk a little bit about it and kind of explain how it works a little bit differently than a platform like Musical.ly, or how Vine originally worked?
Yeah. So, Vine was originally it was an independent project that was bought by Twitter very early on before it launched. And it was the 6-second looping video where you could post stuff very easily. And it was very easy to create and publish. And it, started in 2013 and then was shut down in 2017. And last year I was sitting down with Jack Dorsey and we were talking about how do we solve the problems? How do we fix the mistakes of social media that we've made in the past? And one of those was the shutdown of Vine. Like that he's very clearly like that was a mistake. But the other issues were the very way in which Twitter and Vine were created made it impossible for the company to do right by the users, because the users didn't have access to their own systems of monetization, and they couldn't control their own hosting, and there's a single company that had to decide all the trust and safety rules. And so what we did is we said, well, what if we rebuilt it? What if we rebuilt it in a decentralized way? What if we rebuilt it in a way that was open source, run on a permissionless network, and so that we could have something that users could control? And so that's where Divine comes from. And I first built it with just recording the videos, and then I discovered the archive, and I found that we could get the old archive back. And it was a one-person project to say, oh, I'm going to do this internet nostalgia thing. But what happened was Viners like Reggie and a ton of others saw it and were like, no, actually, I missed that. There was something really important about those constraints, about what was happening and the way it was doing. And there's something really worrying about the world of AI-generated content today, where you go and you sign up for TikTok or YouTube, and you will see mostly AI-generated content as you get started. I think there was a study that showed that 97% of kids' videos, if you just start watching them, are going to be AI-generated content. And I don't want that world. Like, it's fine if I know it's there, but I feel tricked. And so I talked to my friend who was this human rights activist who'd been doing like tools for cameras to observe like massacres or human rights abuses. And I said, can we use this like very serious technology to verify the provenance of this content for these looping videos, these short-second videos? And that's where Divine comes from, is we basically combine new technology that didn't exist in 2013. We couldn't have used it that way to verify the reality of the content, the authenticity of it, and to make sure that we don't have a single set of controls. And amazingly, it wasn't just a few thousand people who were interested into it. You know, millions of people got really excited about it, and excited about an alternative social video app and the possibilities that we could do.
Yeah. Well, I'm also curious, just Reggie, as a creator, what makes you interested in this type of platform as well as, I mean, you mentioned AI. All of these platforms we know now use creators' content uncompensated to train AI. If you've been posting content on YouTube, you've contributed to Google's bottom line by helping them build their AI system. So, what do you think about now as a creator in terms of ownership and control? You're still making content on these other platforms, but what appeals to you about sort of Divine and in terms of that?
Yes. I think what I love about it is, again, like giving the creators the control, but also I love the fact that could be a way to reconnect with your supporters. I think a lot of the times, a person that is a creator and people that enjoy my content, I do want to connect with them a lot better. And sometimes it could be difficult to do that if it's like, I'm making videos and the other person on the other side is like, oh, I wish I could, support them a little bit more by, maybe having different mechanisms that could help us be, I guess you could say, a decentralized, autonomous type of situation.
Or just paid subscribers. I mean, Taylor, your
For sure.
user mag is partially supported by paid subscribers who
Yeah.
subscribe to the newsletter.
Yes, which Substack takes a huge cut of. So,
Yeah.
which is, I think, it's hard. I want to talk about incentive structure on these different platforms, because I think this sort of centralized social media has gotten a really bad rap. Right? Everybody wants to ban social media now because of these sort of nefarious algorithms. How does the incentive structure of a decentralized platform kind of offer an alternative maybe to this sort of algorithmic incentivization that happens with the more centralized? I'll ask both of you guys.
I guess for me, I just want to feel like I have the ability to just have a sense of control again. Like I think majority of it is just understanding like what exactly can I do on these platforms and how can I be of service to the people that support me, and giving me clear rules and guidelines of how to do so, and to be on a platform that could give me those type of answers and give me a specific, like I said, guidelines. I think will be helpful for the creators to understand, like, oh, well, this is the most important thing besides just being on something that's necessarily popular. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I guess like I see centralized social media has incentivized certain types of content, genres of content, right?
Yeah.
And I'm curious if you're, concerned, there's so much concern over social media. You're launching this new sort of social platform. How you think about that?
Well, so the centralized platforms have, like, they say they offer discovery. So like one of the things that if you talk to TikTok is like they offer discovery, but what the other side of it is, if like 70% of your viewers are new, that means that when someone likes your stuff and wants to follow you and wants to engage and wants to be a supporter, wants to be a super fan, they will follow and they'll engage and subscribe, but they don't get that content. And so there's a breaking of that relationship. And, I spent some time thinking about like the sort of the extreme case of OnlyFans. Like, why does someone pay for OnlyFans? Now, step back from the porn and think about the fact that like you have a bunch of creators who are on there and there's an unlimited amount of free pornography on the internet. But people are paying for it, and they're not paying for the content. They're paying for the connection to that creator. They're paying to have a relationship there and be part of something. And so if you look at centralized platforms that are all about advertising and brand deals, and their incentives are to get you to click ads, you aren't going to go and click on a random different ad and buy from a different place just because of that. If you really care about inclusion and community and connection, and so the incentives for the big platforms aren't to cultivate that audience, aren't to cultivate that thing. They want to control that relationship. Whereas creators on decentralized platforms can say, actually, I want to directly connect. When I subscribe to a podcast, I get the podcast. When I subscribe to User Mag, I get User Mag. Like I know it will show up in my inbox. And but when I subscribe to Reggie's stuff, sometimes I see it and sometimes I don't on some of these platforms. And they're not asking me.
For sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think OnlyFans is actually a good example too, because I think so often these platforms are, everybody's sort of relying on each other. And, back in the days, Twitter was a huge driver of traffic to OnlyFans. And then Twitter decided to cut that off, and then suddenly all these OnlyFans creators were left without distribution.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more, I guess, like Reggie, from the creator world? How do you see the creator world evolving, and how are you trying to evolve in this sort of next generation platform landscape with AI coming and everything? Like, what are some of the big challenges that you face today, and how do you see your career evolving in the next few years to kind of navigate those?
For sure, yes. What I'm starting to see now that, of course, since AI is here, we got to kind of figure out, how can we expand our businesses? I think a lot of things right now is super fragmented. It's too I'm doing this over here and they're doing this over here. So trying to figure out how can we bridge, at least for me as a content creator, how can I bridge everything together to where if we do something like a subscription based where I'm having exclusive content, but I'm also doing a movie that I'm promoting here. So it's almost like a newsletter of everything that I'm doing, and also figuring out what are some cool things as far as NFTs, right? I know that was a thing in 2022, where I can have almost say a super coupon, which is only going to be available for 200 people, for my super fans, you should say. That could be a cool idea. So I think just really navigating, how to use, Claude or, OpenAI and things of that sort. And like I said, bridge the gap. So where it's not like I'm doing something here on Facebook, something here on Instagram, something here on Divine, and something here. I want everything to be kind of closed in together.
Yeah, which is so hard, I think, as these platforms
Super
are
difficult.
not interlinked, right?
Very
If everything
difficult.
was more
They
decentralized.
actively fight against the interlink.
Yeah.
If you start putting links to your other stuff, they
Oh,
don't
man.
do it. Or you put a link into an Instagram post, you can't click
It's
on
like a
it. That's
death
why we have link in bio and all these other things, because they don't want the creator to build this unified experience.
Yeah.
What do you think it's going to take to get people on board with this version of the internet? Because I think, it has all these benefits. It's so amazing. I would argue it's obviously better, not just for creators, but for users. Maybe not for, the CEOs of these billionaire tech companies, but how do you think the public can advocate for this? Because it feels like a lot of users don't have power against these big platforms.
So, there's a concept called POSI, post on your own site and syndicate everywhere. And I think that that's really useful, to think that you should have your own domain, your own site, your own place that you can control and post to all these other places. That's why we have alternative Instagram accounts. So, if the first one goes away, people know to follow the other one. And I think that you shouldn't stop using these big platforms where people are, but you should sort of work on migrating your users or your audience to something that you have much more control over. And so, the thing that blew me away with Divine's sort of attention that it got was people weren't excited about the open source. They weren't excited about the decentralization and the permissionless and everything else. They were excited about two things. They were excited about getting the old videos that they missed back, and that we were actually actively taking a stand against AI slop. And so I think that it's important to not overthink this and realize that people want to have fun and they want to be entertained and they want to connect, and just give them that.
Reggie, did you have thoughts? didn't mean to.
What was the question here? I'm sorry.
I was just asking, but in terms of like digital, how can you get people on board with this digital
Oh
idea?
yes. I think, I mean, for one, I've always been a strong believer of like, hey, if you don't know what you're doing, go first, right? Like sometimes it does take an example for people to kind of see in order for it to make sense to a lot of people. Even when Vine came out, like I was literally shooting 6-second videos and my friends were like, what are you doing? Right. But I saw the vision of this is a avenue to where this could be a better way to distribute content. And sometimes it does take, a lot of errors and trial and error to see exactly what can you do, what resonates with your supporters and your audience to get to that realm where like, oh, I think decentralization is a better economy for the creator. So yeah, I think it's just a matter of just keep having at it to find out different ways of why people would be interested in something like this.
I read somebody came up with a term a couple months ago on Twitter called digital homesteading. And they were talking about the rise of AI coding tools and people building their own little spaces online. And I love that idea. And that's kind of how it feels. I feel like using maybe one of these sort of next generation platforms, whatever, but it's like you are able to kind of cultivate your own little space online, I guess.
And we see two kinds of AI or machine learning, large language models. You see the one which is this automated content farms, and it's mediocrity, and it looks beautiful, but there's no substance behind it, and that's the thing that feels like it's tricking us. And then there is the fact that it is also democratized technology. It is now very easy for someone who knows what they want, but doesn't have the technological ability to build their own thing. And so, I built Divine as a one-person project. Now, I also built Odeo and was around when Twitter was built, everything else. And, the original Twitter prototype was built in a day. We started at 9 a.m. We demoed it at 6 p.m. And it took a couple months to get something that launched. But now you don't have to have sort of a small group of very, very technical people. Anyone can do that. And so you should stop thinking of these things as, oh, that's the technologist in San Francisco who can go do this. But use those tools and realize that when it's empowering and when you're using it for creating stuff, then it's a positive force, and it's not doing the AI slop and tricking and sort of mass content farms.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is such a race to the bottom. And I think a lot of people are just getting really sick of these feeds, sick of AI slips, and sick of, like you said, feeling tricked, right? People want real human connection. And I think that seems to be what we're losing, or sort of what we've lost with this era of big platforms.
1,000%.
So
yeah,
maybe that's how we make social media better. I know that was the original sort of title for this panel. So I was going to ask one question, final rapid fire before we go off of like, what is the one thing that we could do right now to make social media better?
So we make it better by changing the power structures and the incentives behind it. When Twitter first launched and there were like 12 of us on it, it was like the nicest place you could imagine. Like it was, Mr. Rogers' neighborhood of social media. Yeah. And then what happened was it grew. It got a bunch of power to define culture and news and drive things forward. And you had massive economic incentives around these things. You had economic incentives around driving ads. And so those pushed social media to do these unhealthy things. And so if we can build a social media ecosystem that is based on the right kind of incentives, that supports healthy community building activities, then it's very different. And I think we will have different outcomes.
I agree. I think, being intentional of what you want to build. And for me, since I've been in OG and I've been in this space for a very long time, I want to be able to give back, and I want people to be a part of my journey. And for them doing that, I have to get them to understand what decentralized is, and, having a subscription base to where people could kind of understand what the value they're getting into me. So really just educating of what this is, and yeah, for the most part.
Awesome. Well, here's to a much better social media future. So thank you guys so much.
Woo-woo. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode. It was recorded in front of a live audience at VidCon 2026 at the end of June.
Our intro and outro music is a remix of the Italian anti-fascist folk song Bella Ciao, courtesy of White Records. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and share this episode if you loved it. To sign up for our email newsletter, visit revolution.social.
And for more interviews like this one, follow revolution.social on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Nosters, Fountain.fm, or wherever you get your podcasts.
And to paraphrase the Zapatistas Subcomandante Marcos, we need a social media revolution to make revolution possible. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. See you then.